great entertainment.
Yeah.
The Southington game, of course, was a great game. And they were behind. Well, I walked in 5 minutes left in the first quarter. They were down by 7 or 10 or something like that. Through the entire game, they were down between 7 and 10. Boys. They were behind 7 and 10 up until about 2.5 minutes left. They ended up winning the game by 5. It was a great, what a tremendous, great.
That's good.
Of course, the East kept the game. Right?
Yeah.
Well, everybody. They played well first half.
Yeah, they were up the first quarter.
First quarter they were.
Yeah, 15 to 12.
They were like, holy man.
Very well. Really good conversation.
The quarter each started full court.
Hidden in plain sight. Yes. Yeah, that was that. And then he did the social media in the second session. He really likes that too.
Oh, no.
He said that he
Get there with phones. For like,
groups and stuff.
Yeah.
and then the second half started. They just,
Yeah, I've seen him play a couple of times.
I've never seen him play.
Well, I haven't seen East, but I've seen most of them.
Oh, yeah.
Against the full court press. They were able to beat him against Middletown, and I forget the other game that I went to saw.
Yeah.
But they were making a lot of risky cross-court passes.
Well,
And it's a team like Middletown that's so they get away with all of it. But a team like East would probably
these guys are big, athletic.
Yeah.
They scored, I think, 95 points.
What's that?
Tesla bills running at the legislature.
What was that?
Electric car sales.
These guys were that good.
Trying to be direct.
well, it's like we
Oh, I see.
a couple of years ago.
Oh,
We don't have
Fourth year.
substitute
right?
for them.
Hers was fantastic.
We'd like to get
Yeah, she was really, really
the
good.
new governor on the track.
Good, how are
Some
you?
demos because we're trying to get pretty involved in some of the
It's so
autonomous
windy out there.
testing. We've been in talks with the Connecticut DOT. And there was a bill in Times Cars where Connecticut's now trying to be a test bed. So the outgoing commissioner we were working with, I haven't met the new commissioner.
New commissioner's a good guy.
And I know he's a real, he knows Lamont, so it'd be great to get the new commissioner on the track as well.
The game over the weekend was like, yeah, it was
East Cavalier Windsor, now we're playing to more teams than we were this time.
It's all not true. We went down to the Senate and had a bunch of senators out and we're just kind of telling them what technology is right now.
you get to play into any
But we definitely Colchester.
What was the game? What was the last game?
But yeah,
What was the last regular season game? No.
Those cars, I mean, people going to California, they just take one of the areas.
No. Well, I got there late. Actually, I was here at 6 and I missed it.
how do I put this? Smoke and mirrors.
Monday night, I like that clear off play that they had with you on the week.
Yes.
Where you just kind of lay in the
But you can't adjust.
100% football players. You got it. It's how to play with humans etiquette. Because we're absolutely because we
Did you get your packet?
not predictable.
You can share
And
that.
also they can communicate.
It has some things on it, so.
So it can take.
I thought this was hilarious.
Some city.
You sat him last week,
they're gonna have
and then
all the
hoping
time.
for a snow day.
He actually start from scratch.
Yeah.
Well, I was at practice, right, again.
But
I thought you were
if
sick
you're a
this
company,
day.
you say you're doing it.
Because I was homesick.
Yeah, we were sick.
then.
And that's
Yeah.
why you get smoke and mirrors.
That's really, I'm not going
That makes sense. I was at practice.
But anyway, there
It's
is stuff
okay.
that is being developed that's gonna save lives and stuff like that. And that's the stuff we're gonna push.
printed this out too.
Yeah.
Yes, I could only get one copy because I couldn't figure out how to use the printer.
Do you want me to type up your drinking game?
Sure. Yeah, because you could probably explain that better because I thought Amistad wasn't very good. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, we're also you're going to start doing not 100%. They were kind of shuttles, which are all
But yeah, so do you want to just do like this and I can do this part? I thought this was funny too. Put on a spectacular
they're going to
show.
be mixed in, but just pick up what you want to print.
Did you interview him?
You're going along. There's something there. You can't figure out how to do that.
It'll just stop.
It just stopped.
I left
It's anonymous, but it's
second to last one.
come on.
Yeah, because they were doing a bunch of stuff. It took forever.
Oh, and by the way, the stoplight, you can't see that. You need to wire the traffic transmit signal sensing, but
I know. If they go through like every single
taxpayers. But you get that stuff. All the cars can use that technology to give drivers warnings. So basically, we're on that. Is, oh yeah, let's go move forward for autonomous because all that other stuff is going to help me.
I also never addressed your NHS toy drive thing.
You got other technologies
Go.
that let your car go.
Can I ask you about that? Did you use like this as one of your leadership positions? And did you have like right?
There's also data.
Okay. Because I asked this. Should I have
Oh yeah, she knows.
Yeah.
Tracy just texted me.
Yeah, she's good. He's good.
On pneumonia.
Woo. Yes.
Well, that's what happens when you get the flu. You keep on
What do you have to do? Like
That's how I
bow
thought.
or something? I don't
Just take less activities.
You got a flag.
It's very like presidential.
And you also when I like that you requested your snow day. We got it. He read that out loud.
I didn't know he was going to.
I'm really glad.
It was a joke.
No, I was so grateful for you.
Good evening.
No, I'm a teacher too.
Welcome to our February 25th Board of Education meeting. We are very excited to be here at Hubbard School. I want to thank Mr. Souza for the hospitality. I'd like to start our meeting. We'll call to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're going to start this evening's meeting with a student presentation from the Hubbard School. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Souza.
I know everyone just sat down, but when students present, do you guys want to come around? Okay. So, do you want to do that now? Sure. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I'd like to welcome the Board of Education, our elected officials. Also, a warm invite. Please feel free to tour the hallways and walk through the building, see the wonderful things happening in our classrooms. Tonight, I'm very pleased to present to you a special presentation by grade 3. And this could not be possible without the work of our staff, but in particular, Mrs. Meg Wesley, Mrs. Mary Rainey. If you could just stand up and be acknowledged wherever you are. I also want to acknowledge our custodians who keep this building spotless in the way that it looks. So, Mr. Howard, Mr. Mike, Mr. Rock, thank you very, very much. was thinking about how I wanted to introduce this to you before we get to our wonderful student presenters. One of the pieces of words that came to mind was coherence. And what I simply mean is that we make decisions, the board makes decisions, administrators make decisions, teachers make decisions, but really what it comes down to is how it's implemented for our students. And so what I have here for you tonight, and what Hubbard School is proud to present, is what I feel is a masterful example of coherence. And by that I simply mean, starting last year when we solidified our Berlin learner outcomes under the direction of Mr. Benigni, focusing on habits of mind last year, the Hubbard School building capacity, moving into this year where we really actualize the Berlin learner outcomes, we developed school improvement plans, and really coordinated ourselves with the direction of Berlin Public Schools with the expertise of Dr. Aaron McGurk. What third grade has put together is what I would call, again, an outstanding example of coherence. It's putting these pieces together, not just in a smattering, but in a very, very meaningful way. And that cannot be possible without opportunity. But you have to be able to take advantage of that opportunity, and that takes dedication, skills, and talent. So I'd like to thank Mr. Benigni and Dr. McGurk for giving us the opportunity with the resources and access to the materials that you're going to see. But really, I want to honor Mrs. Rainey and Ms. Wesley for taking full advantage of the opportunities and resources put in front of them to put together what is an outstanding example of meaningful, purposeful coherence of decisions and support that has been offered by the Board of Education down through administration and how it's reached our students. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to grade 3 and our student presenters.
Just starting off, as Mr. Souza just said, a big focus this year for third grade is we did take a look at the habits of mind. We took a look at the Berlin learner outcomes that we adopted last year. We wanted to choose something that would work together. And in thinking about the habits of mind we spent a long time working on last year, we chose thinking interdependently. And we also looked at our Berlin learner outcomes, and we chose trying to foster mindful and responsive collaborators. And we wanted this to be our focus, not just for us staff members and teachers, but for our students this year as well.
And our jumping off point with collaborating and working interdependently was the global readout. Mr. Souza presented it to us, and we took this opportunity, and it's an experience where there are books chosen, wonderful literature for students of all ages, and students around the whole world read the books that were chosen for their grade level. And we read the book, A Boy Called Bat, and we did this for 6 to 8 weeks in the fall.
So as part of this collaboration that we did, we wanted to offer other opportunities for other staff members in our building to take part in what we were doing in the classroom. So we invited a few different staff members, Mrs. de Blasio, our PE teacher, as well as Mrs. Flynn, our reading specialist. Both came into our classrooms and took part in doing a read aloud with A Boy Called Bat, reading some of the chapters and talking about the book with our classes. And we also utilized Debbie Lamont, who's our library media specialist, to help out with some of the technology pieces. She helped the kids with some of the resources and some of the research they had to do that we're going to be talking about, as well as locating the technology, and offered us with some additional supplemental resources that we could use to go with the Global Reload book, A Boy Called Bat, that we were working on.
As well as working with professionals in our building, we were outside our building and we were working with professionals throughout the world. There was a Facebook page for the Global Real Loud, and you can access that and communicate with other adults and teachers about the books that you're reading and activities that you can do. And one really fun thing that we did was there's a Global Read Aloud website, and the author of A Boy Called Bat at the end of each week would receive questions through email and respond to them on a blog, a video. And so our classes put together some questions that they had for the author, and the very last week we watched the blog, and she actually accepted one of the questions and answered it for the students. And it was I mean, they kept saying they were famous. They were so excited that they had this author talking to them and naming them. So that was an exciting experience, and it was a great way to work with other professionals outside of our school.
connections was there were several different ways that you could connect through this global read aloud experience. Some classrooms may have chosen to Skype, and other classrooms may have chosen to use emails. We found a Google document that allowed teachers to sign up to do a postcard exchange, and there was an opportunity for a classroom from each of the 50 states to sign up to participate in it, as well as 4 other countries. And we decided to sign up that way to do a postcard exchange with our classes. And while we didn't get representation, I don't think, from all 50 states, we had a number of postcards that we received from states across our country, as well as the 4 other countries. This is an example of a couple of the postcards that we received. The kids would be so excited over the span of a couple of weeks, just waiting and asking every day, do we get any postcards, or any postcards that came in. What was really interesting was they learned a lot of information just about the other states, some interesting facts about the states, as well as, some of the classrooms, did write about the read aloud book we were doing, and they were able to kind of respond and share back whether they thought similar things about the book. And we do have a number of other postcards that we received over the table on the side there, so please feel free to look at them.
And so the next part of our project was creating our postcards, and many of the postcards we received were written as a whole class from the other schools, and we decided we really wanted to push our students, and so we assigned each student a postcard. They were going to send it to one of the 50 states, and we wanted their writing to be meaningful, and we had been studying Connecticut in social studies, and so we wanted to see what they knew about Connecticut, because they were going to be writing about their state in their postcard. And we have used a KWL chart where they get to say what they know, what they want to know, what they've learned, but we had been given a book by Mr. Souza, The Genius Hour Guidebook, and it really pushes students to have autonomy over their learning. And so this chart, they got to write what they knew, what they learned, and then after they had learned, what actions do they want to take to learn even more, and what questions do they still have? And so it pushed them even further to be able to make meaningful postcards about their state. And they were also asked to upload images using technology to match their writing, images about Connecticut or from Connecticut, and they were able to do that on their Chromebooks for their postcard. And the students worked together. We wanted them to be able to collaborate, so they used their charts, and Debbie Lamont, like we had said, had given us resources, and they also had books online that they could use to be able to find information that they needed to once they formed their questions on what they wanted to learn more about.
So this is one of the examples of one of the postcards that kids came up with. It shows 2 different sides, just like a regular postcard that you would see. One side is just an image they had to kind of match what their postcard was talking about with our state of Connecticut. And the other side, reflected in their image as well as what they came up with for their writing. And I am going to call Juliana Luongo to come up and share her postcard that she wrote.
Dear Global Read Aloud friends, I'm a 3rd grade student from Hubbard School in Berlin, Connecticut. Our school is located in the center of the state. Did you know our state bird is the American robin? One interesting fact is that our population is about 3,596,080. We are reading A Boy Called Bat. So far, my favorite part is when Bat wears the skunk kit around his neck. I'm wondering if Bat will be able to keep the skunk kit. From Juliana Luongo.
In addition to the postcards, throughout the school year, each classroom and grade level has the opportunity to display student work throughout our building on a number of our larger bulletin boards that we have throughout Hubbard School.
video. We appreciated it so much and wanted to move forward with our focus. So we continued with social studies, and we'll talk more about that. But the first thing we did was a Connecticut relief map, and Jacob Carling is going to come up and explain that whole experience for you.
Hello, my name is Jacob Carling, and tonight I'm going to tell you, I'm a third grader in Miss Wesley's class. Tonight I'm going to tell you how I made this model of Connecticut. First, I learned about where all of the towns are in the state. Then we learned about the landforms and the elevation. Once I knew all about Connecticut, we made relief maps of Connecticut. Some parents volunteered to make salt dough for all of us. We each got a big clump of dough and a piece of cardboard. Then we took the clump of dough and split it into two, one piece for the elevation and one piece for the base of Connecticut. First, we smushed the clay into a tracer of Connecticut. Then we dug out the lower parts of elevation, including the Connecticut River. After we built up all the higher elevations, can you believe we got to paint our relief maps? If you were wondering what the four colors stand for, you can look at the key we made. Finally, we made small flags to label our hometown of Berlin, the state capital, Hartford, and the highest point in our state, Mount Frisell. Then all we had to do was wait for it to dry. It was an exciting afternoon for me and my classmates.
So Mrs. Ray and I wanted to sit down and look at other ways that we could align our curriculum with some of the collaboration that we've been doing. So we were brainstorming, and we found that, as we've been discussing, our year-long study in social studies is of Connecticut. So that was a way to tie in the global reload experience with the relief map and other pieces. We also found ways that through our informational writing unit that we were doing, that we could have the kids write about Native American early settler books, use kind of knowledge that they gained from informational writing to apply some of that to creating books together. And we're also going to be talking about a research unit that they're going to be doing a little bit later on in the year.
And so the students had been studying informational writing in our writer's workshop unit, and at the end of it, we decided, like Mrs. Wesley said, to use our studies on Connecticut. And we decided that we wanted to have them work together, but out of their comfort zone a bit, and so we assigned them a partner from the other classroom, and they got to combine and go into each other's rooms and work together. They were given a subtopic of Native Americans or early settlers, and one part of that they had studied, and they used planners and were able to write a piece together. And they also were expected to go into the computer lab and either create a document or create an image and label it, or upload an image and then add a caption to it.
These are some examples of some of the collaboration the kids have worked on when they were doing these informational books. The top two pictures are when they got together in the classroom. They had to use organizers and kind of plan out their ideas, and it was a really good experience for them to work with someone else, and even someone from a different classroom, because they had to really talk out their ideas and make sure they both agreed on the ideas. And if they didn't, they had to kind of respectfully disagree and talk about what they thought the best plan would be. After they had planned out their paragraphs they were going to write, we spent a day going into the computer lab together, and the students sat together and worked on publishing their pieces, as well as coming up with their conventions that they could put in through Google Drawing on their paragraph pieces. And these are two examples of the informational writing that the students came up with. We do have both of the books of early settlers and Native American over the table if you'd like to take a look. The first one is Early Settler Homes, and that was in collaboration with Jacob Carling, Lucas George, and Juliana Luongo. And we're going to
Early Settlers' Homes by Jacob Carling, Lucas George, and Juliana Longo. Homes were very important to the early settlers because they needed protection and to stay warm. There are many types of houses that the early settlers built. In fact, some houses that the early settlers built were cabins and wooden houses. In order to build these houses, they needed materials in the forest. Lastly, homes looked different. At first, the homes were very small and had a fireplace. Slowly, the homes in Connecticut got bigger and some were even made of bricks. To sum it up, homes were one of the most important things for the early settlers. An early settler's home was made of the material that grew near them.
And our second example of Native American clothing was done in collaboration with Brody Andrade and Jada Lady. And Brody Andrade is going to come up and read his piece on Native American clothing.
Native Americans wore different clothing depending on the role. First detail is men wore breechcloth aprons with leather leggings and deerskin mantles. This shows that Native Americans didn't just use animals as food but as clothing too. However, some men were warriors. Warriors had mohawks or shaved their heads bald and wore face paint too. Women wore knee-length skirts. Let's not forget, both wore earrings and headbands with 1 or 2 feathers. Also, the chiefs wore long headdresses with lots of feathers. This was important because the headdresses showed everyone that they were chiefs. One final detail is wampum belts were to signify tribes. These belts were made of white and purple beads, and they also can come in different sizes. This is important because people knew that it was their tribe and could be trusted. As you can see, Native Americans wore different clothing depending on the role. This is a wampum belt.
We will be continuing to extend this project throughout the school year. Students are going to continue to learn about Connecticut and social studies. An upcoming writers workshop unit includes researching and comparing 2 topics. So we've decided that we will have them use their knowledge on Connecticut and then study the state that they sent their postcard to earlier in the year. And then their research project will be comparing Connecticut and that state. And also, as the book that we had read, the resource we read, suggested that they have ownership of their learning, we're going to ask that each student come up with and create any item that represents Connecticut, and we hope to get a wide variety of artifacts and ideas from the students for how they would represent their state.
We just want to thank everyone for giving us the opportunity to present to you today. We hope that you can see how hard the third graders have been working on this collaboration. We enjoyed our presentation, and please feel free to take a look at some of the other pieces we have over at the table.
So while some folks are getting seated, first to the students, I want to thank you very much for all of your hard work. That was a great presentation, and you are excellent speakers in front of a crowd, which that's actually one of my least favorite things to do, so I'm envious. To the teachers, thank you very much for putting this together, Mr. Souza. I think it's great the way you've tied everything together. We're going to take a quick, brief recess here so that we can say hello to the students and thank them personally. Take a look at their work, and there's cookies over on that table for any students that might want them. So, and adults too, because otherwise we have to eat them all.
You look great person.
No executive session participant.
I'm sorry, I wasn't sharing your business, but we were just talking.
I am. Ugh.
Yeah, that's
No, I went to see
very generous of you.
Is it Kylie?
Came back saying it, and
Who's the? Oh, Megan.
yes, elected person, so.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, you did, right?
I wish I could have taken all the classes.
Hello, Megan.
I've been brainstorming
Saturday.
trying to figure out classes where you at. Oh my god.
Well, we have a relay team. I know that. How do you pronounce Noel's?
Which class?
Well, and
Yeah,
they're like
it's
have
like Noel
one class
Junior or
for the parents that
I'm gonna bring.
and if you
I'm just saying, Patty.
Yeah.
No, it's Patty. More
I have
Kowski.
no idea.
The social media part for the kids' classes.
I just have to talk with
There's
you
a
gotta
couple
on this guy
sounds.
talk. Oh, on Saturday.
I had to say her name last year.
Yeah, did he talk?
I just showed her. Yep. He finished second at the state open.
So parents, we had families come take kids out, and they did it just for parents, and then kids came back and did it.
So Maxine, Megan, Noel,
I thought it was
and
But that's why.
Is it Kylie Gentile?
No, that's why I just want it to be close.
wait, is she related to Mr. Chantal?
I think.
In our building?
I feel like I've heard this story, so perhaps. Yeah. Maybe not.
But it's,
Could have just made that up.
Someone who was out knocking his $2,000.
No, I think that's great.
I said.
Did you?
Do you know what I mean?
No, yes. So that's.
Weeks ago? Yeah. I haven't either.
In my iPad. We got one quarter left.
You just did
Quarter to
amazing, and I don't know if people even
That's
know
why I
how
thought
much
it was so
you
funny.
did, but I
don't do it for that.
I like to be behind the scenes.
I thoroughly wanted. I mean, it wasn't just as a parent.
should get it for
and I was
next
trying to
year.
tell my girlfriends because I was like, I want you. Why don't you go? Oh, you're the president. I was like,
John Carlo.
Brian.
I am the sixth man. So really all that was. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But we'll get back to our agenda. Next up, we have the school committee reports or in correspondence to the board. I'd like to start with our student representatives who are both here this evening. There's no athletic events, so they get to be here.
A day off.
Yeah, we practice
So
early.
we'll go ladies first. Jenny, you're up.
So the Shrek the Musical is March 8th through the 10th, and tickets are available online at the school website. So they're $12 for Berlin staff, $15 for adults, and $10 for students.
So there's over 75 students and staff in this musical, and Mr. Boyle, who is organizing much of the event, he wanted me to say this to you guys. He's excited for the event, and he wants to put on a spectacular show, and I'm sure that's going to happen with all the work they're going to put into this. And next I want to update you guys on our winter sports. We've been doing very good. There's track nationals this weekend. We had two groups of people qualify. The first was Patty in her individual event, the high jump. She's 7th in the nation, I think. So this is a routine for her. She's been here before. I've said this last year too, so I feel like I'm on repeat. But this year we had our relay team qualify with Maxine Muscatello, Megan Parada, Noelle Connier, and Kylie Gentile. So good luck to them this weekend. And we have wrestler Dan Vilius, who won his 3rd Class M state championship. He plays 2nd at state opens, and he's on his way to New England's soon. And for Jen and I basketball, the girls play tomorrow against Plainville. And not only will students get to see a great game, they're also raffling 2 prom tickets. I know those are expensive, so that'll be good for us. And the boys and men will either play SMSA, but it's not definite yet. It's depending on the final score of the Amistad game tonight.
So course registration for next school year is opening soon, and students received the program of studies and advisory last week, and we all watched videos about the courses offered and the electives from each of the teachers, and the additional information's on the BHS website.
Another big event that's going on for our 8th graders is the Course Expo. It's this Wednesday, February 27th at 6 p.m. And students are going to get a brief presentation, meet some of the teachers at the high school, see what some classes are about, so they can gauge some interest in the class and kind of push towards what they are interested in.
And lastly, the Red Cross Club is holding their annual blood drive on March 11th.
It's all from us.
Yeah.
Busy.
Oh yeah, busy time.
Thank you very much, both of you. That was excellent. Congratulations to the athletic teams, and appreciate the report from the schools. Next up, we have correspondence to the board.
No correspondence to the board this evening.
All right. But Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot when you talk about the 2 recent recognitions for the schools.
Sure. Our high school business department had received the award, the Gold Standard Award, for their excellent performance in the business program, as well as we found out on Friday that Willard School has been named the School of Distinction by the State Department of Education for closing the gap based on student performance from where they previously were to the gains that they've made this past year.
Great, thank you. We're very proud of both accomplishments, so well done to you and your staff and to the students involved, so nice job. Next up, we have audience of citizens. Is there anybody who would like to address the Board of Education? Mark?
How you doing? How was everyone tonight? Nice to see you
Good.
guys again. Just a couple extra minutes of the last time I spoke to you all about what's on our agenda coming up, arming our school security officers going down the road. So just want to answer a couple things concerned about, if we do take the vote and you vote yes, about weapon retention, if there's an issue, you know, so obviously, one of the reasons we're looking at former law enforcement is that's, you know, there's a lot of training that officers receive, everybody in law enforcement receives that in the event of an issue or a struggle or something, that you retain that weapon. And there's also special equipment, holsters, different things that could keep that where it should be. So that's something that obviously would look to reinforce that training. Another issue you brought up was just about the right fit, and you know, certainly couldn't agree more. You know, just because someone's former law enforcement doesn't make them the right fit for a school setting. There's no question about that. So, you know, in the beginning, whoever we choose for the director, the security director, will be obviously rely upon that person to help us and all of us here in the room to make sure we get the right people that fit for this position. It is very important. And just to reiterate too, this has been a process. You know, we had a school security reform about a year ago now. It's been about a year. It's already a year that's gone by already. But so you know, we had some discussion about it. That's where really all this discussion kind of emanated from, and heard a lot from people in town. People, you know, again, I know you heard that 70%. I did hear a lot of mostly positives from most people in town about this potential decision. You know, we studied it quite a bit. We had a lot of meetings with myself, town manager, Mr. Benigni, Adam was at a couple of them. We looked at other towns. We looked at, you know, incidents around the country too. So, you know, listen, I don't think any of us really want to have this. It's not what we want to see in our school system, unfortunately. But like I think I said last time, it's the world we live in, and you know, I probably wouldn't have been convinced myself a few years ago, but after the Newtown shooting, everybody in Connecticut and law enforcement helped out, and I spent, you know, some time there helping with different things after that tragedy. And you know, obviously we all know what happened, and we've seen what has happened around the country, and if there's, you know, anything we could do within reason, and I think most of the steps we've been doing with cameras and security systems and vestibules and all the different security plans that we have in place are all great, and you know, they're in place for a reason. I think this is probably the last reasonable step that we could take, and hopefully keep our schools safe in the event of some tragedy, which we hope certainly never visit us here in Berlin. So anyway, appreciate your time, and for the decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is there anybody else who'd like to address the Board of Education? Okay, seeing none, I will close audience of citizens. And before we move to the next agenda item, which is the consent agenda, I would like to make a couple of additions to this evening's agenda. So I believe, Mr. Oakes, correct me if I'm wrong, but I need a motion in order to add to the agenda. Okay, so the first one would be to add a discussion on the some of the state proposals and their potential impact here on the district. I'd like to add that following the facilities related update, which is 6C. And prior to adjournment, we need to add an executive session personnel issue.
You move to add an item which would be 6D, is that what we're adding?
6D.
6D to address, what was the first piece? I know you said the
Discussion on state proposals and potential impact on the district.
I move to add item 6D, discussion on state proposals and potential impact in the district. Do you want me to move forward?
So I have a motion from Carrie.
Second.
Second from Adam. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carries 8-0.
And following that, item 6E, to add an executive session to our agenda.
For personnel.
For a personal.
I have a motion from Carrie.
Second.
Second from Tim. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Also carries 8-0. Thank you very much. With that said, we will move to the consent agenda. Entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I have a motion by Julia, second by Carrie. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. And that moves us to the next section of our agenda, which is number 6, new business. First up is the School Security, Safety, and Residency Director and Armed Security Guards. This is a continued topic. Tonight, hopefully, we will have movement on this, but as Mayor Mark just talked about, this is about our security group here. We had a series of questions to come through. We wanted some additional information relative to our administrators. I'd like to ask Tracy Sisti if she wouldn't mind commenting on the meetings, the results of some of the meetings that she had with our administrators, so that the rest of the board can hear the outcome of that. And we'll go from there. Tracy?
So Brian and I met with each administrator separate, privately, like just them. And the points that came out was 4 were to arm, 1 was to not arm, 4 were to conceal, and 1 was open, indifferent, that was fine. The 4 things that kind of stood out with this was most of the principals wanted to be part of the hiring process. They wanted to be there and know who was going to be in their schools armed. They all said they want something over nothing. If that was a decision, I think that the arming was, they were concerned maybe that we wouldn't be funded if we didn't arm our security guards. So they would rather have that over nothing at all. The public survey was key into almost every single one of them and their decisions. That 70% of the surveys that came back wanted them armed. And so that was their driving force behind their decision, because that's what they had wanted. And that was a concern to have it concealed, because there are families that may deal with traumas when it comes to a weapon. And so they felt that it was important that it was concealed. And so that's the consensus wrapped up with kind of what happened.
Can I just ask a question about something Tracy said?
Absolutely.
Could you elaborate more on, not necessarily, I don't need to know who, but the one person who said that they wanted it open, not concealed? Can you explain what you mean by that?
I don't think the person was just like, if they have one, it doesn't matter necessarily.
Like similar to a police officer.
Plus, they already have, like the middle school and the high school have a person, an SRO that has a gun, and they're used to seeing it, so wasn't really a...
Got it.
It wasn't like they have to be, I don't think it really mattered either way, but why not?
Okay. I just wanted to...
I have a question for clarification.
Yes.
Too. So you said 4 were in favor of arming.
Yes.
1 was not.
Yes.
4 were in favor of concealing. 1 was not. The
Right.
person who was not in
Opposite.
favor took a vote.
1 was apathetic, 1 was not against concealed.
Right. So
They
you-
didn't
But
mind,
why did the
you know,
person who was
Well, the
not
person
in favor
who-
of arming vote on whether it was concealed or
if
not
it's
concealed?
if they're arming it, they want it concealed.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
And then my second question is, you made a point that for administrators, what was sort of a key point was a concern around whether or not this would influence funding of this. So if we were to extract that from the
We
original
asked them
table-
that.
Okay,
That
that's
was
fine.
another thing. Like, we actually said, okay, you can get anything you want. Here's all the money. We're always going to have the funding. What do you want? And I really, this was a thought process. They actually you know, even in talking with them, I think Brian and I found that there was one person that was talking, going, wait a minute, well, wait, and they actually were talking through their thoughts. And I think then it goes back, they all said 70% of the community wanted armed, or 70% of the survey, and that was their driving force.
Okay, so it didn't have anything to do with money.
No, but I do know that that was in their heads too as well. Am I right, Brian, or do you want to add something to that?
The question was posed that take money out of it. If we could have it either way, just give us what you think would be best for your school. And one administrator said, at first I thought not arming was the best, but given light of the time since we initially discussed it, I feel that maybe being armed would be better, but concealed. The one administrator that spoke about not arming, there was also already an armed person in the building. So, you know, there was definitely discussion about if someone is armed already, is there a need to have a second person armed in the building? That was, that was the point on the arming. The biggest concern I think they're going to express, I think Tracy said that, is the concern is once you have a firearm in the building, some of the tragedies that have happened just because it's there. So if a security guard breaks up a fight, you know, and I think the mayor started to touch on it. You know, I looked up online about the different type of holsters and security things. It's not just tucked in their waist or just tucked in their sock. It's not that easy to get at, but that is a concern, especially at the secondary level where, you know, not that we have an awful lot of altercations, but there is the case that they would have to physically restrain a student, and the students are much stronger and so on, that if that firearm ever got in the wrong hands. So that was some of the concern at the secondary level. Tracy, did that hit on that pretty well?
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Okay, so let me start with thank you, Tracy and Brian, for meeting with the administrators and getting that feedback before we move further with what's on our agenda, and that is a motion. So there is a motion for us to consider at this point. So we can have further discussion once the motion is put out there. I just felt that the information relative to the administrators was important to get out even prior to where we have this. So at this point in time, I'll entertain a motion for consideration here relative to the security guards.
Move to approve the hiring of school security, safety, and residency director for the district, 2 armed security guards at the high school, 1 armed security guard at McGee, 1 armed security guard at each elementary school.
I have a motion from Julia.
Second.
I have a second from Adam. And I'm gonna guess we have discussion. So, who'd like, go ahead, Jamie.
This is so difficult for me to, it's very difficult because I think for having some conversations with different people is that it has to be a very thought out, planful way that we go about this. And I know that I said this, and I know, Mark, that you agreed with that, but it's 99% relationships with the kids. So I just want to make sure that we recognize that we understand that, you know, I worry about a situation being read wrong. There's just so much that can go wrong, and it only takes one time going wrong. It's not that I don't feel like I'm against it, but I just feel like it really needs to be, it's a huge responsibility that we have, and that the person and the school and the administration has in working with these individuals. So I'm struggling, to be honest. I just want to make sure that we're planful and responsible in what we're doing. Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
What other districts in the state have armed guards?
I know for sure Glastonbury, North Haven. I know it's Harwington, Barkhamsted. It's a regional district, has had armed guards for a number of years. I'm not sure what other ones, Jamie.
Thank you.
That's Region 10, thanks, Aaron.
But to Jamie's point, I understand what you're saying, and working with students, I know that it is like 100% relationships. And it could also go on the flip side where we get someone who doesn't do their job. Like if you look at the videos from the Parkland shooting, they had their security person who was armed sitting in their police car and not doing anything. So I think there's, you know, a wide spectrum of what could happen. But I think maybe if with this contract, if they're not working out, we just need to let them go and, you know, keep searching for the right person, not just settling for less. Because I think there's a lot of margin for error, but if, you know, it's not a contracted, it's an at-will contract, they could be terminated at any point without any explanation.
Can I ask a question and kind of make a comment, so kind of on the heels of both of those comments? I mean, one concern I have is, you know, we talk about, you know, police officers and ex-police officers. I think I would have a greater level of confidence if they were police officers. I understand there's budget concerns here. That does make me very uneasy that we're going to save money in such a extremely important thing. But that said, you know, if it was an ex-police officer, again, I think I share a real concern that, you know, the idea of now we have firearms in the schools, potentially not from police officers that are controlling that. And I understand the idea of going out and getting ex-police officers, but is there any assurance of that? I mean, is there, if we're having a hard time finding the right person, is there any assurance of that?
So I think that I can answer this way relative to assurance that there'll be former retired police officers or law enforcement, is I believe that by statute, in order to carry a firearm in public schools, you have to be former law enforcement police officer.
Okay.
Local or state.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's
very
the first thing.
important, so.
To, I mean, personal opinion regarding both Jamie's comments and Julia's comments is I agree. I wrestle with this 100%. And I would argue exactly the opposite way as well. Is it only takes one incident with the person that we have with the weapon. It only takes one incident with anybody with a weapon and not having anything there. And it's nothing that we would much rather be talking about curriculum, student achievement, any of those other things, but unfortunately, where we live today, we need to talk about school security and personnel within the schools that can help protect the students in that format. I mean, short of building walls, moats, and, you know, and castles around the students, this is where we are today. Mark, you want to? Normally I wouldn't, but I'm going to give you some latitude.
Yeah.
Remember me at one of our council meetings, though.
Absolutely. Whatever you like. No, I think just to alleviate a little bit of that concern, you know, we also have talked extensively with Chief Blackman and the police department, and these officers, we work very closely with Berlin PD. They were trained with them, and you know, we won't say overseen by them. That's the role of the superintendent and yourself, but they're going to coordinate very, very closely with the school resource officers and the police department. So, you know, that will be another kind of check on what they're doing. And again, the reason for, you know, I know you're concerned about their retired officers, but, you know, the goal is to have officers that have probably recently retired, so really not much change in what they would do, you know, who they are, what they did, and it'd be great if we even to get some SSROs maybe, you know, that apply if they're retired from their respective departments. So that's the thing. We want to get, you know, I mean, I'm with you guys 1,000%. It's a tough step. I'd rather be spending the money on curriculum, honestly. We all would rather be, but the world we live in, I think we do ourselves a disservice not to look at this. But we got to find the right people, and if it takes us a year and we have to go through some people, and then I think that's what we have to do. I agree with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thank you both for the clarification.
The other The other thing I would say is, Julie, Jamie, you talked about a plan, and I would tell you that our experience with the board so far is we wouldn't implement something this important without having a detailed working plan, you know, with all the right steps along the way. Step one is agreeing that we're going to move this forward. Step two would be actually to hire the director so that they're an integral part of the plan. So I know Carrie's tapping on my shoulder, so fire away.
I'm struggling with this because philosophically, I don't think that guns belong in schools. So I do struggle with that a lot. That's not to deny what is the reality of our society and what the statistics show us in terms of where, how many school shootings have occurred and so forth. I think it's really a lot easier if we consider the perpetrator as a faceless other. But when you examine school shootings and who are the vast majority of school shooters, we're talking about arming someone to potentially take out one of the children of our community, because more often than not, these are really emotionally wounded children, right, from and of our community. So that's the part that gets me like shaking in thinking about this, because it's you look at the history of school shootings in America, and the vast majority of them are not, you know, random individuals entering it. You know, obviously you cited Newtown, and that is one of the few exceptions, but in many cases, these are children who are deeply wounded and hurting. And so that's where I kind of go to Jamie's earlier point about there being a real need for sort of highly skilled individuals as it comes to not only de-escalation techniques, but also interpreting behaviors of children who are not able to communicate effectively they are coping with themselves. So that's what I'm really grappling with, and why I'm struggling with putting armed folks in our schools, in contemplating the thought that we could be dealing with, you know, a death of one or more of our own perceived as potential perpetrators. And I've said my point, and I understand what the statistics are and what the vast majority of our community has voted for, but I've put it up there.
How many people filled out the survey?
A little over 400.
You know, I'll agree that this is not something I enjoy talking about, and I think I've said it before, but our most sacred places, schools, churches, are no longer sacred, unfortunately. And though I don't like the thought of arming people within our schools, I think it's the reality we live in right now. And I would hate for something to happen and us to say we should have. I wish we can go back and do it again. We've talked about this before, and I'm comfortable with the retired police officers. I'm comfortable with the hiring of a security director, working with the superintendent, working with the police department, hiring retired officers to work at the schools in consultation with and having the principals of those schools be part of that hiring process because they know their students. And I mentioned this to the mayor before. I've talked to at least 3 people that live in town who are coming near the end of their state police careers and would love nothing more than to work within our schools with the students that they already know, the people that are friends with their children, to be on that same schedule as their children, having the same vacations and summer times off. So I don't think that we're going to be lacking applications. I think that we'll have some highly qualified people. I think, quite frankly, we're going to have a hard time choosing between so many qualified candidates, my personal opinion. Though, and I said before, I'd rather have a security guard that's armed rather than having a security guard that's the first target with somebody coming through a door. There are the days of, I'll date myself, the days of going home for lunch are gone. Sorry, in Southington when I lived there. The days of having parents freely walking in and out of the school are gone. You know, a lot of the things have changed in our school system, and like it or not, this is the reality we live in. And unfortunately, this is the next step that we're gonna have to take. We're doing the vestibules and all the bollards and everything else that are going in. It's something that's unfortunately necessary right now, but I'm very confident that we're going to have excellent people that are going to be applying for it. It'll be an extension of our school district, an extension of our teachers and administrators, an extension of the police department. So I'm comfortable with the motion as it stands.
I have one more question. What happens to, at the high school, we have a security guard at the high school who I don't know would qualify.
We have an evening security person who's not armed and not a former.
What is the title of the person that, I can't think of his name, that sits, you know, when you walk in during the day?
He's a paraprofessional.
Okay, so he.
Even though he's a retired police officer, he's a paraprofessional.
So he's retired.
He would have the opportunity to apply for it, should he want the security job, but he's a retired police officer, he's hired as a para.
Would that position no longer exist?
He loses his job.
The para position?
I think what you're saying is one of these security positions take that chair
Yes.
during the day.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, that's what I'm asking.
I'd have to talk with Mrs. Eustace to see where we want to do there for that position. We did have a security person there before, that was one of the budget cuts last year, and the need to have someone out there necessitated putting a para there.
It would worry me to no longer have him in there. I mean, I think especially when I go into school, he has a fantastic relationship with the kids. I think he does more steps than, I mean, he's everywhere. I mean, he walks all over, which is nice to see. So I just want to, because of his relationship, that's why I'm glad to know that he's a retired police officer. I didn't know that, so that kind of worried me, is how that would change. But if he is a potential.
Retired police officer hired as a para and being used in that capacity, right? So.
But however, that the position he's in is a union position, correct?
The para position is a union position.
Yeah. So he actually has maybe more perks in the. That's just me speaking out loud.
To see what the interest is, right?
Yeah. This is just me thinking out loud.
So actually, I just pulled up there's 425 respondents to the survey, and it's closer to 85% between strongly agree and agree, with 10% strongly disagreeing, and I would say there's about 6%, maybe 7% just disagree, so 83%. So either agree or strongly agree.
Are these all parents or just community in general?
No, these are parents. These are parents.
So that might represent more students, correct? Because if a parent has 3 kids.
It could be, it could represent more. When we sent it out, we sent out into our emails that we have on files through school messenger, so it wouldn't send out multiple. Right? But you could have 2 parents, you could have divorced parents, multiple emails that it's going to. So I couldn't tell you that they're distinct, you know, families. I wouldn't feel confident in saying that.
But unless I'm mistaken, that's more than a 20% response for a survey, which is pretty phenomenal if you put out a survey.
It just went up to 429.
So while you're sitting here?
Sitting here, yeah. So it's
Someone in the audience.
Somebody's watching. Somebody's actually watching.
It's Evelise.
Just jump for it. So.
Tim, yep.
Yeah, one question that kind of jumps out at me. In the motion, we have 2 armed security guards at the high school. Just the rationale behind that. We hadn't talked about, I thought, any more than 1 at each school plus the director. Just a
Well, I think, you know,
population thing?
No, I think it's based on number of students, and we definitely talked about at the high school, currently we feel that we're understaffed, not having a security, using a para, a front office person. We've actually used our night security some days. So the thought is having 2 security and the SRO at the high school would give adequate coverage. It's not to say that some of that security might be bridged over to the afternoon when we have, it might not be all at the same time, so it might be some staying for that time right after school when sports are running and so on, so.
I mean, the other comment, just to make for the edification of everybody, I think in the years that I've been on this board and seen hiring of staff, superintendent, principals, et cetera, I think the manner in which we've gone through those processes has been extremely diligent, extremely thoughtful, extremely thorough. And certainly, time and again, what has resonated out of a lot of those cycles of interviews has been the fit and feel of that person with us as a district. So I think anybody that we're going to put into these committees to hire people will definitely still have that in mind, is making sure, is this person going to mesh with the people that they're going to be working with, because that's what we as the Berlin School District, I think as a little family, have always fallen back on when it comes time to hiring anybody, making sure that they're going to fit with us. So
I also have something I'd like to add. You know, when it just kind of clicked, Friday night I was at the Upbeat Parents Night, and thinking about all the work our SRO does, thinking about, regardless of being armed, like not even considering that, looking at just a portion of the vapes he has confiscated, there were so many, it was overwhelming. I definitely think our schools would benefit from additional security. It really seems like our SRO is doing an amazing job, but it's, you know, he like alluded to like scratching the surface at one point. So, you know, the Upbeat Weekend was great, and talking about all the current issues and trends with substance abuse, all the new things going on with, you know, the vaporized THC and CBD that's out in the schools. There's a lot more stuff going on now, and I've even said it, you know, in the high school I teach at, like, you know, there's a lot more available to kids now than there were when I was in high school, like things for them to get in a lot more trouble with. If people, when I was in high school, smoked cigarettes, there was a small handful of the people that stood across the street from the high school. Now I feel like so many students, your athletes, your National Honor Society students are vaping. They're getting caught. It seems to be an epidemic among so many students now, and you know, that's just a small example, like putting the armed guards aside. I definitely think there is an increased need for security at this point to keep our students safe.
I'd like to just say one kind of brief thing, and to be honest with you, I'm, well, along with others, very struggling with this, but it was actually something that Carrie and Jamie kind of said that I think kind of clicked for me. The picture that you painted, you know, an emotionally distraught child in the school, and someone potentially has to deal with that. So the question in my mind is, what would be better? A police officer rushing in, perhaps afterwards, after it's escalated, or someone in the school who potentially has a better relationship with that child, knows that child more, and is able to be there sooner. And to me, kind of, it's really a choice of one or the other. Either way, there's someone coming in there that's armed. It makes it easier for me to make the decision.
I think actually, I mean, you know, obviously if we could reconfigure the scenario altogether, taking a more community-based preventative approach altogether would be the best case scenario. Sure. So we don't have kids who reach that point of being so emotionally distraught because they feel a part of, and they feel as though they have the resources within the schools in the form of helping professionals to whom they can go in advance of reaching that boiling point. Absolutely. That's my thought. So I would rather be having a discussion about investing in those helping professionals within a school and increasing those, but that's not the unfortunately, that's not the discussion we're having, because we've gotten so far down the road that we can't really back up. I see your point, but yeah.
Any other questions, discussion, items people would like to bring up? Okay, at this point then, we do have a motion on the table. So at this point, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. So I have 7 in favor, 1 opposed. Any abstentions? No, that's our full gamut. Motion carries 7-0 to approve the hiring. Oh, 7-1. Thank you. Motion carries to approve the hiring of a school security safety residence director for the district. As it reads here, 2 armed security guards for the high school, 1 armed security guard at the middle at McGee, and 1 armed security guard at each elementary school. I know that was difficult for everyone, but thank you for everyone's thoughtfulness as they went through this, through the process. And as we said before, we'll be tasked with putting a group together to not only come up with a thoughtful plan for how this would be implemented, but also a committee to make sure that's very inclusive for the hiring of these folks as well. When we talk about Tim's point about our hiring process, I think there's a perfect example in the room sitting over there with Eileen and the high school principal. Is we went without one for quite a while until we found the person that was the right fit, and that's what we believe in. So welcome again. We're so glad to have you, but I think that's a perfect illustration of how we do business. So, all right, moving on. We move to the open choice program participation for next year. Brian, if you'd like to go over what you've provided us with.
Sure. In your packet, you have a breakdown of the total number of students, as well as the students that would be exiting by graduation for next year. This does not include students that maybe would not reside in Hartford or move out during the year. So if a student's a choice student and then moves out of Hartford, they're no longer eligible for the choice program. So we do have students throughout the year that do exit the program. So looking at our numbers, if you look at the yellow line, the bump up, we were at 128 this year. Our bump up for next year, we'll be losing 10 students based on graduation. So we'd be at 118. I know we offered quite a number of seats last year, and this year I'm looking at only offering 13 seats at the K level and 1 at the 7th grade. The 7th grade level is because it's a sibling of one of the K students. And I want to say that if you look at the second sheet that you have in your packet, you'll see that of the K students, 3 of them already have siblings in the district. So there's 4 students coming into the district because they have siblings here, and there would be a total of 9 other students coming into the district that would be at the K level. And to give you a rough idea, based on our projection of numbers, we'd be looking at 7 students at Griswold, which would bring our class size based on projection up to 17. We'd be looking at 3 students at Hubbard, which would bring our class size up to 17 in one and 18 in another. And then we'd be looking at 3 students at Willard, which would bring the class size up to 17. Without those students, based on projection, Griswold is at 15.6. At Hubbard is at 16.5 or 16 and 17, and then just based on number of classes, and Willard is at 16.25. So you can see we're going up based on number of classes, roughly a student in each class, based on the choice students that would be coming in. That would put us at 4.74% choice students based on our given enrollment of 2787. Obviously, that can change year to year also based on number of students coming in. Our goal would be to continue to try to take students at the K level, taking only siblings for the other grade levels. Last year, we took students across all grade levels, which can be much more difficult based on the student population that's opting to move and to transition into the district.
So, first, Brian, thank you for the report. This is helpful to look at this way, and I appreciate the fact that you're only talking about opening seats with the exception of the 1 7th grade position, which is a sibling. limiting to kindergarten. I know that we opened a lot more seats last year, and that created somewhat of an interesting transition for some of the students. But if I read this right, so next year, now I'm already going to next year, is 7 would graduate out, and under this concept of only opening up K students, is we would be looking at 7 seats next year if everything else remained the same.
Seven or less seats, depending on the number of students we have. It could be more if we can, based on the number of, it's really looking at the number of sections that we have and what the student enrollment would be in those sections. We don't want to raise the class sizes by that much, but we still want to stay within the range of the percentage that we'd like to stay at with choice students.
So then to redirect my question is, if everything remained the same and the incoming kindergarten stayed consistent, it wasn't a big jump in kindergarten students coming in next year, then we'd be looking at about 7.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. We could, as long as we're above the 4, we want to be right at it. As I said last year, if we didn't take in the students, we would have fell to the 2%.
Okay. Questions for Brian before we move to a motion? All right. Hearing no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the superintendent's recommendation regarding the level of participation in the open choice program for the 2019-2020 school year as presented.
I have a motion from Carrie.
Second.
Oh, are we gonna have a discussion?
After motion and
Second.
Oh,
I
yeah.
have a second from Adam. Discussion?
Yeah, sorry Adam for cutting you
Nope.
off. Okay, so Brian, thank you for opening up the seats in kindergarten. I know that we talked about that in November. And like I shared with some of you, while I was out campaigning and I went to over 2,000 houses, a lot of people in town, and I can't give you an exact number, I wish I tallied them, people aren't necessarily happy with issues that have come out with choice, and I know I've shared that with Brian and Matt. And though I don't know what the solution is, and though I am for educational equality and opening up opportunities for students, I need to, respect the concerns of people in town, especially while I was out campaigning and listening and hearing what they had to say. And I think at this point, I think that I've heard from a lot of people about a lot of different issues, and at this point, I can't confidently speak to how we're solving them or necessarily addressing them. I think one of the ways we are addressing them is by opening the seats in kindergarten. I know the district I teach in, that's what they do, and I wouldn't know who my choice students are. I have no idea. So I think long-term, it is a really, really good solution. But right now, at this point, representing the people who I've spoke with, who supported me, I struggle with this one tonight because a lot of people do have major concerns. And some of the stories I've heard, I'm very shocked. And I know a lot of parents are upset, and I wish more parents were here to speak out. So I just wanted to share my 2 cents.
I think this past year, because of the number of students and the various grade levels, there were some issues and concerns. I think the bigger picture is that there are funds tied to the choice program. And I think that's what I'm not quite sure that everyone understands. And those funds are tied directly back to teaching positions. Without those funds, we would be at a greater deficit than we already are at with the budget. And I'm not saying that the equity of the education, so I think it's an initial step in the right direction to try just at the K level and see where that goes. See how well we function, and then evaluate year to year whether we should be taking more students or not taking students. Does it work at the K level? And then, like I said, reevaluate.
And Brian, I know I understand that, and I understand that the money's not gonna grow on trees, and if this doesn't go through, like, we certainly will have a funding gap, a very significant one, and I wanna support the budget, and I know this was budgeted for, and I know we received significant funds from it.
So I think it's important that we also point out that this year we're talking about 14 seats. And last year we were talking about 57. So we have listened to what a lot of our folks have said. And we are trying to limit open seats to the kindergarten grade. And I know that my thought process is if you start those students at the kindergarten grade and they move through our system, as they move older, they truly are ingrained into our Berlin system. There is no coming from another school out of another town into this one, and with whatever those learned habits are there, you learn what's acceptable here right from the beginning, at the beginning of school. So
I think it's also offering the seats does not necessarily mean that students do take the seats. So, we're offering those 14 seats. We believe that we'll lease the siblings, that there'll definitely be 5 students coming in with the siblings. But other than that, it's up to whether students decide on Berlin or have other choices or just opt out of the program at some point.
any other discussion, comments, questions? All right, hearing none. We'll move to the vote. All in favor of,
You got more?
wait, say again?
All in favor?
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Is that 2? Okay, so 6-2. Boy, doing math today is
We
really
should bring that
difficult for me.
trigonometry class back for the president here.
Just basic math, arithmetic would be fine. Second grade, probably somewhere in there. Okay. Item number C on our agenda, facilities-related updates.
Mr. President, I do have a couple of things for the board on updates. The vestibules for the schools, which we've been speaking about for a while and have been funded by the state and the town. They've gone through their process of fabricating materials and doing the appropriate design and actually getting the design fine-tuned. We have schedules for each one of the construction periods. These schedules were put together by not only town facilities, but also Fryer Associates, who's our designer. Excuse me. And just for the record, one of the schools, Willard, we are going to do during the school year this year. Now there are some logistics with that, naturally on doing construction during the school year, but we think it's important to get that facility completed because we use that facility in the summer for preschool, for summer school. And so therefore, that's going to be about an 8-week session of construction. Naturally, a lot of logistics involved. Those logistics will be worked out with the administrators and the custodians, and of course the planners. That should start in April and end in May. So certainly by the end of the school year, Willard's facility will be completed. It's one of the larger ones we're doing. The other 3, McGee is going to start in June. It's going to take about a 5-week period. Be done sometime in July. Hubbard is about a 2 to 3 week period. That will start at the end of July, about the middle of July, and actually be completed around the end of July. So it's about a 2 or 3 week period the way it's scheduled here. And Griswold will be started at the end of July and be done by the middle of August. So I think everybody's pleased to see that we do have something set up here that will be done. I will say that because you know what we do in the schools, from a custodial standpoint, we clean all the schools very well in the summer and do things we can't do during the year. There's going to be also some logistics with construction going on in these schools while they're trying to complete the school opening. So we'll have an interesting summer in front of us, but I think, we've all been waiting for these vestibules, and for good reasons. It's part of our security program, and so I'm pleased to report that we're on our way correctly with that. Just one other thing. One of the new things we're planning is a renovation of a room for special ed operations, especially classroom at McGee. That renovation is now being looked at by facilities. We're also getting some estimates, we're getting some estimates on getting design done for that. Once a designer is chosen and a decision as to how to fund that, then we'll have an estimate on what that facility may cost to go forward. I don't think it's going to be a cheap one. I think it's probably somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000, although that's not a professional estimate, but that's an order of magnitude to think about. We are going to have to figure out how exactly that's going to be funded, but we've determined that that is necessary for our special education program. So those are two things I have.
Thank you, Jeff. Yep.
Just go back to something. Tell me, what is the reasoning for the additional special education room, or what is?
In speaking with Linda Olean, our director, because of some of the necessities for middle school children who are coming now out of elementary school, they obviously need more space. We have a number of them that need extra care and extra space to be taken care of, and looking at the facilities we had at McGee was not adequate.
There needs to be a restroom that's available exclusively to those students. There also needs to be that the old FCS room, which is what it would be, still has some of the stoves and ovens, sinks and things, so that some of the life skills that they would be taught in that room would be used. We don't have another classroom at McGee that is set up for that at this time, so retrofitting that classroom makes the most sense for that program.
Any other questions for Jeff? Thank you, Jeff. Next up is the item that I put added to the agenda. I think it was important for the board to be aware of and also to start to discuss some of the things that are coming from, that we're hearing that may be coming through the legislature or in the governor's budget. All impact, should they pass and go through, would impact the district in a significant way. The first item that I want to mention is there are two proposed Senate bills, number 454 and 457, that talk about the realignment of schools into a regionalization. 454 is from Senator Martin Looney, who is essentially proposing that any school district within, and I found out there's a correction to the bill, within any school district that resides in a municipality of 40,000 people or less, not students as it's written, but people, would need to regionalize with a larger district next door. So in our case, it would be merging with New Britain. The second one talks about school districts of 2,000 students or less would be required to regionalize. We are, as Mr. Benigni said, I'm glad we're a district of 2,800. But both of them, I certainly understand some of the thought process there as they're trying to figure out state, the state of the state, if you will. But I personally, and I'm going to open it to the rest of you, in no way could I endorse that kind of activity at this point, at any point, frankly, is for us to lose our autonomy, for us to direct the education for our students. Considering what we've been able to accomplish and build the system the way we have for all the predecessors before us, to then have it torn down over, I'm not really sure what, doesn't make sense to me. The second big issue that we saw come out of the governor's budget is the concept of pushing 25% of the teachers' retirements from the state, which they've not funded for the last 30 or 40 years. And since it's been mismanaged, we're going to kick it down to the municipalities and make it somebody else's problem. Again, I understand people are coming up with creative ways to make things right in Hartford, but they made a commitment to all of the retirees that we have out there and all the future retirees that we have over years and years and years. And, you know, I said to my neighbor the other day, it's a great deal, is, you know what, is I don't want to pay my electric bill anymore, so I'm just going to send it next door to him, right? Is we're just passing the buck, and now it's going to come back to the municipalities. And you add that to all of the other funding reductions that have come along the way, and it's just, you know, kind of throwing salt in wounds that are already there. But my point with this one is, if that moves through, I think we have to remember that that becomes an add-on to expenditures, not part of the operating budget. That's something that unfortunately the town and the Board of Education, they're gonna have to work together to figure out, and it all comes down to the taxpayers again, and what I see is just more burdening on the taxpayers. But what can't happen is, well, the state just saddled us with X amount of dollars, and for the sake of this discussion, I'm gonna say $100,000, and now we say, well, we have to pay this over here, you have to take $100,000 out of the school budget. To me, that's unacceptable in order to make that balance. So I open it up to everybody, but I know that there's some chatter out there that people have brought things to the Board of Education's attention, but take a look out here. You can look through our minutes. People aren't coming and talking to us about this. So, you know, there can be some social media chatter out there that people like to throw things out there, but the fact is, at least that I'm not aware of, nobody's come and talked to me. So with that, I open it up for anybody's comments or concerns about what I just talked about. I think it's important we get it on the record. We go from there. So I've given you my personal point of view. I throw it to you guys.
Yeah, I would just say that I think it's important to acknowledge what's going on in the state. And I mean, to me, it was kind of a double take for, it's a bit confusing because there's multiple bills going, that are going through, or not going through, but being proposed right now. But 454 would in fact affect our town. And I think, and from my reading of the bill, it says realign the towns as the probate districts, similar to the probate districts, which would be New Britain. So I think just to understand that these are the types of proposals that are out there to address issues with funding. And I think I agree. I'm glad that, you know, as a board we could talk about this and say we do not think this is right for our town. I think that's important to acknowledge, but it is definitely concerning.
Any other comments?
I'll go.
None?
Oh,
you don't raise your hand very high, you know.
I was giving everyone else an opportunity. I've seen the bills, and obviously spending a lot of time at the Capitol, hearing some of the chatter, and obviously between CCM and cost, the Council of Small Towns, and the superintendents and the boards of ed, CABE, and everyone else, obviously there's a lot of concern. What I will say is I don't mind the bill because it begins the discussion. It's been the discussion that's been happening for the last 10 years, though nothing's really happened with regard to regionalization. We talk about it a lot, but nobody wants to be the one giving in. Years ago, we talked about regionalizing the 911 call center with a few other towns, and studied it, looked at it with Newington and Rocky Hill, went nowhere. Because everyone's in favor of regionalization as long as they're the ones controlling everything. So we're fine with it as long as it happens in our town. Likelihood of something like that going through is probably slim, but it's certainly something that needs to be considered, because if it comes up again and again and again, eventually it's going to become more attractive and going to gain more traction as the state continues to look at deficits and shortfalls coming down to the municipalities, and every time there's a shortfall, it goes just back down to the taxpayer. With regard to the teacher's retirement, that's an intriguing one. And one of the comments that I had made, and Ev, you're not going to like this, but I'll say it anyways. I said, if you're going to require the municipalities or the boards of ed to pay a portion of the teacher's retirement fund, then you've got to get rid of binding arbitration, because you can't say that the boards are giving too rich of a salary increase when you don't give them the ability to make a lower increase, a reduced increase. So I think there's a lot of discussion around it, and it's been on the table before. And for people to say having skin in the game, I understand that, but you're also handcuffing boards of ed at the same time. So it's not really an equal argument. There's going to be much more discussion around teachers' retirement just because of the state that we're in. The state employee retirement, the pensions and the health benefits, the numbers are through the roof, and the teachers' retirement fund is another big area. So they're looking at any and all opportunities to try to reduce the state spending. But unfortunately, when they reduce the state spending, they increase the municipal spending. So I think you'll see a lot of changes with these bills as they go through. The governor's bill is just that. It's a governor's proposed bill. It's a starting point. A starting point of a discussion. There's a lot of revenue line items that were not even included in the governor's budget, which I think are going to be things that are going to be offset over the course of the session. But until June 5th, it'll be an ongoing debate.
Thank you, Adam. Anyone else want to chime in, or were you good?
I think it's just gonna be a long road before we get to a point where we need to act and make decisions.
Okay.
But that's why we should all go out and vote tomorrow. Sorry, just wanted to put that plug out there.
Moving along next, we have a executive session, so entertain a motion to move to executive session, inviting Superintendent Benigni.
Move to enter into executive session to discuss a personnel matter, inviting the superintendent.
Second.
Motion from Tim, second from Carrie. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are in executive session. We need a space. Just the board.
It is a fantastic.
DP3.
The funny thing is some people.
Minute 50, 49, 48, 47. Clock's going, let's go.
Gennaro Bizarro. I mean, how can
Yeah, you can break
can't
down.
think of a better name? That's fantastic. I'm so impressed.
Here's the thing.
Get in there.
Sal's getting ready.
You and me.
He's gonna come back. Later be service. Pull your jets, lady.
I do too.
I was it just clicked. Actually, it was calling out that scenario.
Thanks,
all right, there's two scenarios.
Yes, and then when you put it the way you did, I'm like, you're happy.
You're better off having someone.
Yeah, we can potentially talk them out, down, whatever.
Earlier
Before it gets bad. Instead of, you're right, guns a-blazing coming in, there's no discussion in that case.
I want 10 cushy chairs in there.
Oh, come on, you want those. Can I tell you how much I appreciate it? If Richard Roy was here, he'd probably kiss you. He's got back problems.